Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Red Donkey Projections. I'm Lucas. I have Eric here as always.
Hey guys.
And today we'll be discussing the 2022 United States Senate election in Missouri, and in particular, the possibility of former Governor Jay Nixon running. Although Jay Nixon has said that he hasn't said anything yet, he is hosting a fundraising event, I believe, this week, which is very interesting. Maybe it's a signal that he is running in 2022. We'll be making a lot of Phil Breslin comparisons in this video, and we'll make our final prediction. And with that being said, let's get right into it.
Yep. So let's talk about background of Missouri just in general. It's a pretty deep red state, especially in recent history. It's become a bit more red when Donald Trump was added into the equation. But it's not as red as the other states here in this area, such as Tennessee or Indiana, for example. So in 2008, Missouri was actually very close to being blue, which is crazy because that was not even 15 years ago when Obama and McCain were going neck and neck. And Obama could have contested and even won the state, but at that point he was winning in such a landslide that he didn't even bother. But, Jay Nixon was also running for the governor in the same election year, and he outran Obama by like a crazy 18.8 point margin. So he won very decisively, to say the least. So now going into 2016, or actually no, 2020, Trump won the state in a safe margin. It was right around 15, and in 2016 against Hillary Clinton, he won it close to 20 points. So there's a stark contrast in between those two elections. And Jay Nixon was the last Democrat to actually hold office in Missouri. I think it was around 2012. I think from that point on, things went more Republican. And in 2018, Claire McCaskill was the incumbent, but Josh Hawley still beat her by 6 points. So that kind of shows you where Missouri is trending nowadays.
So let's take a look at Jay Nixon. So he, as mentioned, he was the former governor of Missouri. So that is a pretty good background experience and name recognition for him to run for a Senate seat. He was quite popular, although it is important to note he was not as popular as Phil Bredesen was, but he was very, very moderate. For example, he called himself the budget cutter in chief, which could maybe help him in a state like Missouri that's not as red as other states, but it's still a pretty Republican state. He also does support, having a smaller government, which is different from a lot of Democrats, especially these days. Many of them are calling for a bigger role of government. And this is a little bit outdated, but we found this website on the issues that does show some of his views in the past. It is probably outdated. In 1998, he was against partial birth abortions, for example. But we did find articles saying that he did veto some other type of abortion bill that was trying to put more restrictions on that. But yeah, it was a couple things on his social issues that did look kind of Republican, but overall, he is quite moderate. So I'll toss over to Eric now for a background on Eric Greitens.
Yeah, so Eric Greitens is probably the reason why we're making this video and why this race is getting a bit more attention than one may seem because, Missouri, everyone thinks it's pretty Republican nowadays, but this year it may or may not be a huge exception. So Eric Greitens is a GOP in Missouri, and he is quite unpopular. He was the former governor, but he resigned after not multiple, but a very significant sexual assault allegations. Apparently, I believe his hairdresser and Greitens had an extramarital affair, meaning he had an affair while he was married. And then there were some, misuse of campaign funding, suspicions that, who also picked up some ground in court. So Greitens was in a pretty bad spot. Like he was under fire for multiple things. And he was never charged though. That's the interesting thing. He got acquitted of, most if not all of his suspicions legally.
but it's still left a very, a dirty, it kind of left a dirty patch where, in his political career. And that's really going to hurt him nowadays because, people, this, this was a very, this was a very talked about topic here in Missouri, especially. So, you know, it's interesting how he's running now. Maybe people will forget, but probably not. And yeah, as I said, his own Republican state legislature began impeachment proceedings. So that's how bad these hearings got. So he's quite unpopular, to say the least.
Right. So now let's discuss the election as a whole. I've got the map pulled up here. I didn't fill it out, but let's talk about Missouri. What's happening right now? First of all, the current senator Roy Blunt is not running for re-election. So this again makes it seem very like the 2018 Tennessee Senate race, where wow, I'm losing. Oh, Bob Corker chose not to run for re-election. So that makes things a little interesting. But it would make the race would be very, very interesting if Jay Nixon would run. Now, I don't think he is the best candidate to run here. I think the best candidate for Republicans, Democrats to run here is Jason Kander, who is, very, who was also, I don't, yeah, he was also pretty moderate. He ran in 2016, ran ahead of by Hillary Clinton by around 15 to 16 points, which was insane. But uh, we're going to compare this to Bredesen's race and see what we can make out of it. So, as a reminder, Phil Bredesen lost by 10.7 points in 2018 when he ran against Marsha Blackburn. The thing is this: Phil Bredesen ran in a blue wave year in 2018, although we don't know it yet. Now, 2022 is likely going to be a red wave year given historical trends and patterns. And the second thing is, as mentioned by Matthew Torrey, is one of our subscribers. Shout out to you on our Twitter page. He made the good point that Phil Bredesen is much more popular than Jay Nixon is. But it comes with a catch with the fact that Missouri is nowhere near as red as Tennessee is. As you saw, Missouri voted for Trump in 2016 by around, I think, 19 points. Tennessee won around 30, I believe. And the final thing is Eric Greitens is a much worse candidate than Marsha Blackburn. Eric Greitens is very, very unpopular, while most, I would say, generic Republicans had a more of a neutral view of Marsha Blackburn. So I'm going to hand it over to Eric now to say what we are officially predicting for this race.
So Lucas and I have decided to give this race a likely, and it's going to be somewhere around 6 to 7 points, somewhere in that area. But I say that with a grain of salt because Lucas and I, we both had quite a bit of trouble coming up with an actual number for multiple reasons. One, because there's so many factors to consider in this race. We have an unpopular Republican governor, but in the red wave year. But also, we have a pretty favorable Democrat, and it's a pretty good Democrat for the Missouri Democratic Party to run. So there's a lot of things, to think about and that could happen. And also, the second thing is that we're still pretty early in this Senate election and all the Senate elections. And as you know, in the political world, a lot of things can happen between now and November of 2022. So, it's still going to be tough to call, but because Missouri generally is trending more and more to the right in recent years, Greitens, no matter how unfavorable and unpopular he is, still has the upper edge just because of the way Missouri is trending nowadays. And also, as Lucas said, we are anticipating a red wave year, and no matter any of these minute details, that is still probably going to help Greitens. So that's why we're probably going to give him somewhere in the likely, not a high likely per se, but a pretty low likely in the 6 to 7 point area.
I agree with that completely. And I want to also bring in polling here. Currently, we do have very limited polling. It's from a Republican internal, I believe, that has Eric Greitens only up by 4 points, which was a little bit surprising. I do expect that poll to be potentially an outlier, but there's also the fact that polling in Missouri has been quite bad, as you saw in the 2020 governor election in Missouri. The polls were showing a dead heat between Mike Parsons and Nicole Galloway. However, with the when the election time came, it ended up being a huge win for Mike Parsons by I think around 19 points. So that was really interesting to see. So we're gonna take polls with a grain of salt as we always do from now on, given how poor they were in the 2020 election. We're gonna go with likely for this one. And that does mark the end of the video for today. Thank you all so much for watching. If you like this episode, please hit the like button. If you like our content, please subscribe. And we'll see you in our next episode tomorrow.
See ya.